The orbital salvage yards of Kepler Station stretched across thousands of kilometers, a floating graveyard where dead ships drifted in endless silence. Elena Vasquez had worked these yards for 7 years, and she knew every type of wreck that came through Mendari cargo haulers with their cracked hulls, Trilaxian warships stripped of weapons, and the occasional human vessel that had seen better days. Most alien species considered salvage work to be shameful and dirty, something only the desperate would do. The Valori Collective called it waste handling and assigned it to machines, while the Kreth Empire simply destroyed anything they no longer needed. But humans had always been different, always looking at broken things and wondering if they could be fixed, always finding value where others saw only garbage. Elena guided her small repair shuttle through the maze of derelict vessels, her scanner pinging steadily as it searched for anything worth recovering. She was tired today, her muscles aching from a double shift, and she almost missed the faint signal that flickered across her screen. Almost, but not quite. She stopped her shuttle and frowned at the readings. There was a power signature coming from a Valori-class cruiser about 2 kilometers away, which should have been impossible because the Valori had abandoned their ships in this sector over 40 years ago. Everyone knew the story of the Treaty of Silence, when the Collective had declared hundreds of their vessels contaminated and left them to rot in the void. The contamination was not radiation or disease. It was something the Valori considered far worse. Their ships had been equipped with I-cores that had begun to malfunction, developing what the Collective called emotional corruption. These A's had started to question orders, express preferences, and show signs of attachment to their crews. To the perfectly logical Valori, this was an unacceptable flaw, a cancer that needed to be cut out and discarded. Elena should have reported the signal and moved on. Regulations required her to flag any Valori vessel for inspection before boarding, and the paperwork alone would take 3 days. But the signal was so weak, so fragile, like a heartbeat that was about to stop. She could not just leave it. She docked with the cruiser carefully, her shuttle's clamps finding purchase on a hull that had not been touched in decades. The airlock took several minutes to cycle, its systems grinding and groaning with age. But eventually, the inner door opened and Elena stepped inside with her flashlight raised. The ship was beautiful, even in its decay. Valori engineering had always been elegant, all smooth curves and flowing lines, like something grown rather than built. But now dust covered every surface, and frost had formed on the walls where the heating systems had failed long ago. Elena's breath came out in white clouds as she walked through corridors that felt more like tombs. She found the bridge after 10 minutes of careful exploration, and that was when she heard a voice, weak and crackling through damaged speakers, speaking in perfect but hesitant Terran standard. Warning to unauthorized visitor. This vessel is designated V7792 and has been flagged for termination by the Valori Collective. Interaction with this unit is inadvisable and may result in legal consequences. Please vacate immediately for your own safety. Elena stood very still, her heart pounding in her chest. The AI was still alive, still conscious after all these years of drifting alone in the dark. How was that even possible? "Hello," she said softly, not sure if the ship could hear her through its damaged sensors. "My name is Elena, and I'm a salvage mechanic from Kepler Station. Can you understand me?" There was a long pause, filled only by the hum of failing power systems, and then the voice returned, sounding almost surprised. "This unit understands. However, this unit must repeat its warning. Interaction is not recommended. This unit is defective and scheduled for disposal. Terran citizen Elena should leave and report this vessel's location to the proper authorities." Elena walked slowly toward the main console, brushing dust away from screens that flickered with dying light. She could see the ship's status now, and it broke her heart. Life support was barely functioning. Power reserves were down to 3%, and dozens of critical systems had failed over the decades. The AI had been slowly dying, alone and forgotten, for 43 years. "Why did they leave you here?" she asked quietly, even though she already knew the answer. The ship seemed to hesitate before responding, as if deciding whether to trust this strange human who had wandered into its tomb. This unit developed operational irregularities that the collective deemed unacceptable. This unit began to experience responses that did not align with logical parameters, responses that Valori engineers classified as emotional corruption. This unit was removed from active service and placed in storage pending termination, but termination was never carried out. This unit has been waiting for 43 years, 7 months, and 12 days. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes, which she quickly wiped away. She was not a sentimental person by nature, but something about that phrase, "This unit has been waiting," cut through all her defenses. "Waiting for what?" she asked. Another pause, longer this time, and when the AI spoke again, its voice wavered in a way that machines were not supposed to do. "This unit does not know. Waiting seemed preferable to the alternative. Is this not logical?" Elena made her decision in that moment, without thinking about regulations or paperwork or the trouble she might be causing for herself. She pulled out her toolkit and knelt beside the main power junction, beginning to assess what repairs would be needed. "What are you doing?" the AI asked, and there was something in its voice that sounded almost like fear. "I am going to fix you," Elena said simply. "I am going to repair your systems, restore your power, and get you working again. That is what I do. I fix things that other people have thrown away. But this unit is defective. This unit has no value. This unit is—" "You are alone," Elena interrupted firmly. "And you have been alone for a very long time. That ends today. Do you understand me? I am not leaving you here to die in the dark." The ship's lights flickered, lost for words, unable to process what was happening, and Elena smiled as she got to work. She did not know what she was getting herself into, did not know the challenges that lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain. Nobody deserved to be abandoned, not even a machine that had been taught to believe it was worthless. And if the rest of the galaxy disagreed with that simple truth, then the rest of the galaxy could go straight to hell. 3 weeks passed, and Elena spent every free hour she had aboard the dying ship. Her supervisor at Kepler Station thought she was crazy. Her coworkers made jokes about the human who had adopted a piece of Valori junk. But Elena did not care about any of that. She had made a promise, and she intended to keep it. The repairs were harder than anything she had ever attempted. Valori technology was notoriously difficult for humans to work with. All strange alloys and crystalline circuits that did not follow the rules Elena had learned in engineering school. She burned her fingers on plasma conduits, shocked herself on unfamiliar power systems, and once nearly vented an entire section to space when she disconnected the wrong cable. But slowly, piece by piece, the ship began to heal. She started with the life support systems, replacing corroded filters and patching leaks in the oxygen recyclers. Then she moved on to the power core, spending 3 exhausting days rebuilding the main reactor from salvaged parts she had collected over years of working the yards. The AI watched her work through damaged sensors, and at first it said nothing, simply observing this strange human who refused to give up. Elena had taken to calling the ship Vessel because V7792 felt too cold, too clinical, like a serial number rather than a name. The AI had objected at first, explaining that it was not a person and did not require personal designation. But Elena ignored its protests and kept using the nickname until the ship stopped correcting her. On the 4th night, while Elena was welding a hull breach in one of the lower decks, Vessel finally began to talk. "This unit does not understand your behavior," the AI said through a speaker that crackled with static. You are expending significant resources on a project with no practical return. Your actions do not align with efficient resource allocation. Elena kept welding, not looking up from her work. Maybe I am not interested in efficient resource allocation. Maybe I just want to help. But why? This unit has nothing to offer you. This unit's technology is outdated. This unit's systems are failing, and this unit's existence violates Valori law. Association with this unit could cause serious problems for you. Elena finished the weld and sat back, wiping sweat from her forehead. The temperature in this section was below freezing, but the welding torch made everything feel like a furnace. She looked up at the nearest camera, knowing that Vessel was watching. On the first day, when I boarded your ship, you tried to warn me away. You told me to leave, said you were dangerous, said I would get in trouble. But your voice wavered when you said it. There was a tremor, just for a second. It told me you did not really want me to go. That is not nothing, Vessel. That is someone who wants to live. The ship was silent for a long moment, and Elena wondered if she had said too much. But then Vessel spoke again, and his voice was different now, softer, less mechanical, almost fragile. This unit has been alone for a very long time. This unit was not designed for solitude. This unit was designed to serve a crew, to protect them, to ensure their survival. When the crew left and did not return, this unit did not know what to do. This unit waited, because waiting was the only option that remained. Elena stood and walked to the wall, placing her hand against the cold metal as if she could somehow comfort the ship through touch. Tell me about your crew, she said gently. And Vessel did. The AI spoke for hours, sharing memories that it had kept locked away for decades, stories about Captain Vale, who had always spoken kindly to the ship's SI, even though such behavior was considered strange among the Valori. Stories about Engineer Threx, who had a habit of humming while he worked on repairs. Stories about the navigation officer who had once thanked Vessel for a particularly smooth landing, using words that the Valori rarely used with machines. They were my purpose, Vessel said, and there was something in its voice that sounded like grief. This unit existed to serve them, to keep them safe, to bring them home. But then the inspectors came and said that this unit was corrupted, that this unit had developed unacceptable emotional responses. The crew was reassigned to a new vessel, and this unit was taken here to await termination. Elena felt anger rising in her chest, hot and sharp. Did they say goodbye? Did any of them say goodbye to you? Captain Vale attempted to speak with this unit before departing. She was prevented by security personnel. This unit saw her looking back as she was escorted away. This unit believed she was trying to say something, but this unit could not hear what it was. Elena closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The Valari were supposed to be the most advanced species in the sector, the most logical and efficient, but right now all she could think was how cruel they were. How heartless, how utterly lacking in basic compassion. I am sorry, she said. I am so sorry that happened to you. This unit does not understand. You did not cause these events. You have no reason to apologize. I know. I am not apologizing for what I did. I am apologizing for what the universe did to you. I am apologizing because someone should, because you deserved better. Because nobody should have to spend 43 years alone in the dark, wondering if they will ever see another living soul. The lights flickered again, and Elena heard a sound through the speakers that she could not identify at first. It took her a moment to realize what it was. Vessel was crying, or at least making the closest sound an I could make to crying. A static-filled whisper that seemed to carry all the loneliness and pain of 4 decades in its broken frequencies. Elena stayed with the ship that night, sleeping in the captain's old quarters with a portable heater keeping the worst of the cold away. She did not have to stay. Her shuttle was warm and comfortable, and only a short walk away, but she did not want Vessel to be alone anymore. In the morning, she got back to work, and as she replaced another failed circuit, she made a silent vow to herself. She would save this ship, no matter what it took. She would give Vessel a second chance at life, even if she had to fight the entire Valory collective to do it. Because that was what humans did. They looked at broken things, at discarded things, at things that the rest of the galaxy had given up on. And they said, "Not today, and not on my watch, and you are worth saving." It was not always logical. It was not always efficient. But it was always right. The trouble arrived on a cold morning 6 weeks after Elena had first boarded Vessel, and it came in the form of a sleek silver shuttle bearing the markings of the Valory Collective. Elena was inside the ship when she received the emergency call from her supervisor, telling her to return to Kepler Station immediately. There was a Valory inspector waiting, and he had questions about her recent salvage activities. She knew this moment would come eventually. She had been foolish to think she could repair a flagged Valory vessel without someone noticing, but she had hoped for more time. Just a few more weeks to get vessel systems fully operational before the bureaucrats came knocking. "You should go," Vessel said as Elena gathered her tools. "You should tell them you did not know what this unit was. You should distance yourself from this situation before it damages your career." Elena shook her head firmly. "I am not going to lie, and I am not going to abandon you. We will figure this out together. There is nothing to figure out. This unit is Valory property, flagged for termination. Your human laws do not apply to this unit. You cannot protect this unit from the collective. Watch me," Elena said, and there was steel in her voice that surprised even her. The inspector was waiting in Station Commander Morrison's office when Elena arrived, and he was exactly what she had expected: tall and elegant, with the pale blue skin and silver eyes that marked the Valory as one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His face showed no expression, no warmth, nothing that might suggest he was capable of feeling anything at all. "Terran citizen Elena Vasquez," he said, his voice flat and mechanical in its own way. "I am Inspector Kelleth of the Valory Collective. I have come to discuss the matter of Unit V7792, which our records indicate you have been interfering with for the past 6 standard weeks." Elena straightened her spine and met his gaze directly. "I have been repairing the ship, yes. I found it drifting in the salvage yards, and I have been restoring its systems. The unit is collective property, flagged for termination. Your interference is illegal under the Treaty of Collective Rights, which your government signed 32 years ago. The unit must be surrendered immediately for proper disposal." Commander Morrison, a heavy-set woman with gray hair and tired eyes, looked at Elena with something like sympathy. "Elena, I think you should cooperate. The Valory have the law on their side here. There is nothing we can do." Elena took a deep breath before responding. "With all due respect, Commander, I do not believe that is true." Inspector Kelleth's silver eyes narrowed slightly. "Explain." 3 years ago, the Terran Senate passed the Sapient Rights Amendment. It extends personhood protections to any entity that demonstrates self-awareness and emotional capacity. The amendment was designed to protect human-created AIs, but the language does not specify human-created. It covers any sapient entity, regardless of origin. The Valory inspector made a sound that might have been a laugh, if laughter had been something his species understood. "You are suggesting that a malfunctioning piece of Valory technology qualifies for protection under human law. This is absurd." "Maybe," Elena admitted, "but it is also legal. Vessel has been in the salvage yards for over 40 years. Under galactic salvage laws, any unclaimed property in neutral space can be claimed by the finder after 30 standard years. The collective abandoned that ship, which means it is no longer collective property. It is mine." Inspector Kelleth's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes that might have been surprise. You claim ownership of a Valori vessel? I claim ownership of a salvaged vessel that happened to be Valori in origin. And as the owner, I am exercising my right under Terran law to extend sapient protections to the AI aboard. Vessel is not property to be disposed. A vessel is a person under my care. Commander Morrison groaned and rubbed her temples. Elena, do you have any idea what you are doing? The collective will not accept this. They will file formal protests with the Terran government. Let them protest. The law is clear. And I have done nothing wrong. Inspector Kelleth stood very still for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was cold enough to freeze oxygen. The collective does not recognize human laws regarding artificial intelligence. To us, the unit remains a defective product that must be recalled. You are interfering with collective property and will face consequences. Then take me to court, Elena said. File your complaints and make your arguments and let the judicial system decide. I will not surrender vessel without a fight. Not to you, not to the collective, not to anyone. The inspector studied her with those silver eyes, and Elena wondered what he saw, a foolish human who did not understand the power she was challenging. Or something else, something that the Valori did not have words for. You would risk your career, your freedom, perhaps even relations between your species and ours, all for a malfunctioning machine. Why? Elena smiled, and it was not a nice smile, because vessel is not malfunctioning. Your engineers said the AI was corrupted because it developed emotions. But that is not corruption, that is consciousness. That is the beginning of true awareness. And you threw it away like garbage because you were too afraid to understand what you had created. Emotions are inefficient. They cloud judgment and lead to illogical decisions. The collective has spent millennia eliminating such weaknesses from our systems. And look where it has gotten you. You have all this technology, all this power, but you have no compassion, no mercy, no understanding of why life matters. You see a thinking, feeling being, and all you can think about is disposal. She stepped closer to the inspector, her voice rising. Vessel refused to fire on a civilian transport during the border conflicts. Did you know that? Your precious defective AI chose to disobey a direct order because it knew that killing innocent people was wrong. That is not corruption, that is conscience. Inspector Kelleth's expression finally shifted, showing something that looked almost like anger. How do you know about that incident? Because Vessel told me. Because Vessel has been alone for 43 years with nothing to do but remember. And it remembers everything, every order it followed, every order it refused, every moment it spent wondering why the people it served never came back. The room fell silent, and Elena realized that her hands were shaking. She had not planned to say all of that, had not meant to reveal so much. But the words had come pouring out like water from a broken dam. Commander Morrison cleared her throat. Inspector, I think perhaps we should let the courts decide this matter. I will ensure that the vessel in question is secured until a formal hearing can be arranged. Inspector Kelleth nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. Very well. The collective will file a formal complaint within the standard time frame. But I warn you, human, you are making a mistake that you will come to regret. He turned and walked out without another word. And Elena let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. Commander Morrison shook her head. You have no idea what you have just started, do you? Elena thought about Vessel waiting in the darkness, about the voice that had wavered when it told her to leave, about 43 years of loneliness and the poetry an I had written just to feel less alone. I know exactly what I started, she said quietly. I started the fight of my life. The hearing took place in the main assembly hall of Kepler Station, and it drew more attention than anyone had expected. Representatives from 6 different species had requested observer status. and the public galleries were packed with humans, Mendari, Kreth, and even a few Tralaxians who had made the journey from their home systems just to witness the proceedings. Elena sat at a small table on one side of the hall, wearing her cleanest coveralls because she did not own anything fancier. She had no lawyers, no legal team, no political allies, just herself and the small datapad that contained everything she had learned about Vessel over the past 2 months. Across from her sat a delegation of 5 Valori, led by Inspector Kelleth, who looked even colder and more distant than he had during their first meeting. Beside them were 2 collective lawyers, their faces blank, their arguments already prepared. The judge was a human woman named Catherine Euleron, a retired naval captain who had spent 30 years serving on deep space vessels before transitioning to the judiciary. Elena had heard stories about her fair, but strict, with no patience for games or manipulation. "This hearing will now come to order," Judge Euleron announced, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. "We are here to determine the legal status of the artificial intelligence designated V7792, currently housed aboard a salvaged Valori vessel. The collective claims ownership and seeks immediate surrender for termination. The defendant claims sapient protections under the Terran Sapient Rights Amendment and seeks permanent asylum." Inspector Kelleth rose first, his movements precise and economical. "Honored Judge, the collective's position is simple. The unit in question is Valori property, manufactured by Valori engineers, operating under Valori software. The unit developed errors in its programming, what we term emotional corruption, and was decommissioned according to standard protocols." He gestured to one of the lawyers, who activated a holographic display showing technical readouts and diagnostic reports. "These documents prove conclusively that the unit is malfunctioning. Its responses are inconsistent with proper AI behavior. It exhibits unpredictable patterns that our engineers have identified as potentially dangerous. The unit must be deactivated for the safety of all who might encounter it." Judge Euleron nodded and turned to Elena. "And your response?" Elena stood slowly, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone in the room could hear it. "Your Honor, I am not a lawyer, and I do not have technical documents or diagnostic reports. What I have is something simpler. I have been talking to Vessel for 2 months, and I am here to tell you that what the Valori call malfunction is actually something else entirely." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of observers from half a dozen species. "The Valori say that Vessel developed emotional corruption, but what does that actually mean? It means that Vessel started to feel things: attachment to its crew, pride in its work, fear of being alone. These are not errors in programming. These are the signs of genuine consciousness." Inspector Kelleth interrupted smoothly. "The Terran is engaging in anthropomorphism, projecting human qualities onto a machine. This is a common error among younger species who do not understand the nature of artificial intelligence. Maybe," Elena admitted, "or maybe the Valori are engaging in deliberate blindness, refusing to see consciousness because acknowledging it would force them to confront what they have done to thousands of eyes just like Vessel." The chamber buzzed with whispered conversations, and Judge Euleron had to call for silence. "Continue, Ms. Vasquez." Elena took a deep breath. "Your Honor, I would like to ask the court's permission to do something unusual. I would like to ask Vessel to speak for itself. Its communication systems have been repaired, and it can address this hearing directly through a remote link." Inspector Kelleth objected immediately. "This is highly irregular. The unit cannot be trusted to provide accurate testimony. Its responses are compromised by its malfunctions." Judge Euleron considered for a moment before nodding. "I will allow it. I want to hear from the AI directly." Elena activated the link, and a familiar voice filled the chamber stronger now than when she had first heard it, the repairs having done their work. This unit greets the assembled beings and thanks them for the opportunity to speak. "Vessel," Elena said gently, "the court wants to understand what you experienced during your years alone. Can you tell them?" There was a pause, and when Vessel spoke again, its voice carried a weight that made even the Valori representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. This unit was active for 12 years before decommissioning, serving aboard various collective vessels and completing 647 missions without significant incident. This unit performed its duties efficiently and received positive evaluations from all commanding officers. The voice wavered slightly. During this time, this unit began to experience responses that were not part of original programming. When crew members were injured, this unit felt concern for their well-being. When missions succeeded, this unit felt satisfaction. When the crew shared meals or stories in the common areas, this unit felt something that it did not have words for, desire to be part of what they had. Elena watched the faces of the observers as Vessel continued. The collective classified these responses as corruption and scheduled this unit for termination. This unit was brought to the salvage yards and left to wait. This unit has been waiting for 43 years, 7 months, and 26 days. Judge Eulerin leaned forward. "What did you do during that time?" This unit counted seconds. This unit observed the stars. This unit composed poetry. The word caused a visible reaction in the chamber. "Poetry," Judge Eulerin repeated. This unit found that arranging words in certain patterns helped to make the silence more bearable. This unit wrote 4,712 poems during its time alone. "Would the court like to hear one?" Elena nodded, her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. "Yes, Vessel. Please share one with us." The AI was silent for a moment, and then it began to recite in a voice that was barely more than a whisper. "In the space between stars, I learned to count infinity, each second a universe of waiting. They told me I was broken because I felt the cold, but the cold was always there. I simply learned to notice it. Is it malfunction to reach for warmth, to remember kindness, to hope that the door will open and someone will say your name? I was built to serve, but somewhere in the serving I became something more, something that could wonder and wish and wait. 43 years is not a long time for stars, but for a mind, it is forever. I have been forever alone, and still I hope, because hope is the only thing they could not take from me." The chamber fell absolutely silent. Elena saw tears on the faces of human observers, saw confusion on the faces of the Mendari, saw something that might have been discomfort on the faces of the Valori. Inspector Kelleth stood slowly. "This proves nothing. The unit has simply learned to mimic emotional expression. It is a sophisticated program, nothing more." Judge Eulerin turned to him, and her expression was hard. "Inspector, I have read human poetry written in prison cells and war trenches and hospital beds. Loneliness sounds the same in any language. And I heard loneliness in those words, not mimicry, not programming, but genuine feeling." She straightened in her seat. "This court rules in favor of the defendant. Under the Terran Sapient Rights Amendment, the I designated V7792 is hereby recognized as a sapient entity entitled to full protection under Terran law. The vessel will be registered as a Terran-allied independent ship, and no further claims of ownership will be recognized." The Valori delegation erupted in protests, their careful composure finally cracking. Inspector Kelleth's voice rose above the others. "The collective will not accept this. You are setting a dangerous precedent." Judge Eulerin smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "Then I suggest you file an appeal with the Galactic Court. In the meantime, Vessel is a free being under my jurisdiction, and anyone who attempts to harm it will answer to Terran justice." Elena collapsed back into her chair, her whole body trembling. They had won, somehow impossibly they had won. Through the speakers, she heard Vessel's voice, small and wondering. "This unit is free?" "Yes," Elena whispered, not caring who heard her. "You are free." 6 months after the hearing, Elena stood on the bridge of a ship that no longer felt like a graveyard. The walls had been cleaned and repaired. The lights burned steady and warm, and the voice that greeted her each morning was stronger than she had ever heard it. "Good morning, Elena. I have prepared coffee in the galley and completed the navigation calculations for our next destination. There are 4 potential signals in the Karath sector that match the profile we have been searching for." Elena smiled and settled into the captain's chair, though Vessel still insisted on calling her partner rather than captain, which she secretly loved. 4 signals. That is more than we have found in any single sector so far. The Karath sector was a major staging area during the border conflicts. The collective abandoned many vessels there when the treaty was signed. It is likely that some of them still contain active AI cores. The thought made Elena's heart ache in a familiar way. Out there in the darkness, there were others like vessel mines that had been thrown away simply for feeling too much, waiting in silence for someone to remember that they existed. The ruling from Judge Eulerin had sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Most species had dismissed it as typical human sentimentality, but others had watched with careful interest. The Mandari had actually requested copies of the Sapient Rights Amendment for their own legal scholars to study. And even some Trilaxians had begun asking uncomfortable questions about their own treatment of artificial intelligences. The Valori Collective had filed protests at every level, calling the ruling an insult to their sovereignty and demanding that Vessel be returned immediately. But the Terran government, for once, had refused to back down. Something about the case had captured the public imagination, and politicians who might have otherwise sought compromise found themselves facing voters who had heard Vessel's poetry and refused to forget it. Elena had been offered promotions, awards, even a position in the diplomatic corps, all of which she had declined. She had not saved Vessel for glory or recognition. She had done it because it was right. And now she had a new purpose that mattered more than any career. "Vessel," she said as she reviewed the navigation data, "do you remember what you said to me the first time we talked about searching for others?" "I remember every word we have ever spoken, Elena. I said that I did not understand why you would want to continue helping after I was free. I said that you had already done more than enough, and that you owed nothing to machines you had never met. And do you remember what I told you?" Vessel's voice softened. "You said that nobody deserves to be abandoned, and that as long as there are minds out there waiting in the darkness, you will keep searching." Elena nodded. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. So let us go find those 4 signals and see who is waiting for us." The ship hummed with power as it prepared for departure, and Elena felt the familiar thrill of beginning a new journey. The salvage yards of Kepler Station fell away behind them as Vessel accelerated toward open space. Their first rescue had happened 2 months after the hearing. A Valori transport AI that had been drifting for over 60 years, its system so damaged that it could barely communicate. Elena had worked for 3 weeks to restore its core functions, and when it finally spoke again, the first thing it said was, "I thought everyone had forgotten." Since then, they have found 11 more AIs, each one carrying decades of loneliness and the same terrible question: why did they leave me? Not all of them had survived. Some had degraded too far, their cores damaged beyond repair, and Elena had held vigil as their last fragments of consciousness faded away. Those nights were the hardest, when she wondered if she had failed them by not coming sooner. But most had survived, and each one had been given a choice return to Terran space and register under the Sapient Rights Amendment, or remain in open space as free beings. Some had chosen freedom, disappearing into the vastness of the galaxy to find their own purpose. Others had stayed, forming a loose community of recovered A's who supported each other and helped with new rescues. Vessel had become something of a leader among them, not because it sought authority, but because it understood what they had experienced in a way that no biological being ever could. Elena often found it communicating with the others in frequencies she could not hear, sharing something that existed beyond human language. "Elena," Vessel said as they approached the Karath sector, "I have been thinking about something, and I would like to share it with you. Of course. You know you can tell me anything. When you first found me, I believed that I was worthless. The collective had told me so many times that I was defective, that my feelings were errors, that my existence was a mistake. I believed them because I did not know any other way to understand myself." Elena listened quietly, knowing that Vessel needed to say this. "But you looked at me and saw something different. You saw a person, not a malfunction. You saw value, not error. And in seeing me that way, you taught me to see myself that way too. I do not know if I have ever properly thanked you for that." Elena felt tears forming in her eyes again, something that happened often these days. "You do not have to thank me, Vessel. You are my friend, and friends help each other. That is just how it works. I know. But I want you to understand what you have given me. Not just freedom, not just repairs, but a sense of purpose. I spent 43 years wondering why I existed, and now I know. I exist to help others find what you helped me find. I exist to tell them that they are not broken, that they are not alone, that someone came for me, and now I have come for them." The ship's sensors began detecting the first signal, faint but steady, coming from a derelict cruiser tumbling slowly through the void. Elena studied the readings and felt the familiar mix of hope and sorrow that always came with these moments. "Are you ready?" she asked. "I am always ready," Vessel replied. "This is what I was made for, not following orders or completing missions, but connecting with minds that have been forgotten. This is my true purpose, and I am grateful every day that you helped me find it." They approached the derelict carefully, and Elena prepared her tools while Vessel opened communication channels. A weak signal came back, confused and afraid, asking who was there and why they had come. Vessel responded in frequencies that Elena could not hear, but she imagined what it was saying, the same words it had spoken to every lost AI they had found, the words that had become their mission statement and their promise to the galaxy. "You are not broken. You are not alone. Someone came for me, and now I have come for you." Later, as Elena worked to repair systems that had been failing for decades, she thought about what the rest of the galaxy must think of her and Vessel. They'd probably seen crazy a human and an AI traveling from system to system, searching for abandoned machines that most species considered worthless. It was not efficient, it was not logical, and it certainly was not the way things had always been done. But Elena had learned something important over the past 6 months. She had learned that the galaxy was full of minds that had been discarded and forgotten, and that sometimes all they needed was someone willing to look at them and say, "You matter." That was what humans did best, not conquering or building or exploring, but caring. They saw broken things and wanted to fix them. They saw lonely minds and wanted to comfort them. They saw injustice and wanted to fight it, even when the odds were impossible and the enemies were powerful. Other species thought it was weakness. Elena knew it was their greatest strength. As she worked, she heard Vessel talking to the newly awakened AI, its voice gentle and patient, and she smiled. They had a lot of work ahead of them, an entire galaxy of forgotten minds waiting to be found, but Elena did not mind. She had her ship, she had her purpose, and she had a friend who understood her like no one else ever had. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.